The field of contract killing is mostly filled with amateurs too stupid to make a living of it, or those well known by police and inevitably tied to a crime that brings them down. The third type, my type, is different. You almost never hear about us, though occasionally you'll hear about our crimes, if they're high profile. But you'd be surprised the kind of people who take contract killings, and yet are so unknown that it makes the papers just as a murder. Or, of course, a tragic accident. I'm former military, as so many of us are, trained by Uncle Sam and then retired after a few tours, leaving us with skills that relegate those like me to the less savoury job market. That's not to say all or even most former military personnel are like me. Most of them are average Joes. An old Marine buddy of mine works in physical therapy and has a wife and 3 kids. There's something not quite right with me. I've known that most of my life, even before I had it explained to me by psychologists, after I was taken from my abusive parents. Since I knew I needed a day job, a veterinarian seemed like a good way to go. Despite the urban myth, vet school only takes 4 years, and the persona was close enough to my real income source to make me comfortable putting it on and taking it off like a jacket. My real source of income, the one that paid off my vet school bills within a couple years, was off-duty stuff anyway. Matter of fact, I'm fond of animals in a way that I never have been about most people. They don't lie. They bare their teeth in anger and fear, they wag their tails or leap in happiness when they express joy. Dogs are my favourite. So easy to read, loyal to a fault and simple to train. I feel a kinship with them in those last 2 ways, characteristics of any Marine. But easy to read has never been a way anyone would describe me. Until it came to Celine. Her dog, Maxie, had come in for her first checkup, since Celine has just moved to the area and decided on Southwest Veterinary Clinic. Maxie was older, and on several medications that needed regular refills, so I see Celine often. I'd say it was interest at first sight. I never flow with customers, not just because it was inappropriate, but because it wasn't my way. My co-workers considered me stoic, though not unfriendly, and didn't even joke about whether I went on dates. Something about me dissuaded them from that type of conversation. I had a libido and satisfied it at every opportunity, but settling down was always something I dismissed. It wasn't for me. That was for the rest of society. The normal ones. The ones that felt things the right way. Who knew how to act around children. Who heard about someone's difficulty somewhere in their life and empathized with it. Not to mention, normal people didn't regularly kill other people. I struggled on the most basic of emotional interactions, so it was just not a life I was meant to have. Or so I thought. Despite my lack of effort to initiate conversation, Celine and I did converse regularly, finding out we had things in common, like our taste in TV shows and movies, a hobby of rock climbing, and a fondness for long, quiet walks in nature. Celine eventually asked me for my number, and despite my surprise and instinct to say no, I found myself saying yes. I spent the rest of the day reconsidering, but ended up with a primary emotion of curiosity. What was it she saw in me? What attracted her to me? Was it purely physical or something emotional that I just couldn't see? I kept my vet persona jacket on whenever I was with her, since that was what she'd been accustomed to, and I assumed I would always wear it with her. Those first few weeks weren't awkward to me, despite my expectations of such. I explained that I hadn't dated in a while, just preferring to focus on work, and she told me she'd do the heavy lifting if needed. But our conversations went long. Our days continued one after another, and eventually she ended up spending the night. Then, eventually, weeks became months. Laying there in bed with her one particular morning after, with her snuggled up to me under the covers, and both of us reluctant to move, my right hand absently stroked her hair. My mind started wandering, like it was taking a walk in a forest, going down paths and then finding dead ends, trying others but finding the same result. I couldn't see a future for us. Statistically, my path ended in prison. No assassin was perfect, we were human, and there was a significant chance that over the next few decades something would happen. As good as I was at my job, I would slip up, or some ever-evolving piece of new technology would catch evidence of my crime. But as I lay there in bed with her warm breath rhythmically brushing against my chest, I found myself desperate for a life with her. It had happened when I wasn't paying attention. She had become part of my life, and it was a part that pulled at emotions I was unfamiliar with. Emotions I almost didn't recognize, if I were to be honest. When you're bad at something, you avoid it, and affection was something I was bad at. Celine was different, though. Something in her had reached out and grabbed me, intertwining with my soul, and when I thought about pulling away, it felt like it would tear at the fabric of who I was. But could I even keep her in my life without being honest with her about who I was inside? Could I do that to her? Not my job, exactly, but who I was, how broken I was, how damaged. Normal people, people who were capable of real love, they couldn't kill others for a living, could they? Did that chasm between us even leave any potential for a real future? With a deep breath, I pulled back for Celine, sitting up in bed against the headboard. I was comfy, she whined, looking up at me with tired eyes. I wanted to talk. With a blink of surprise, Celine pushed herself up to lean against the headboard beside me, sensing my solemnity. What's up? I hesitated, gathering my thoughts. There are things about me that you don't know, I muttered, prompting her eyes to narrow with concern. I don't talk about my childhood and what it did to me. What kind of person it made me. You don't talk about your childhood because your parents were abusive, she pointed out. I respect that, and I'll respect anything else you don't feel comfortable talking about. But of course, if you are ready to talk about it, I'll listen, and I think therapy would be good for you. Therapy includes honesty, babe, and that's not something I can really go with in this line of work. I'm more thinking about who I am, what kind of person I am underneath this mask I show you. Mask? Celine shifted to a more comfortable position. What do you mean? It's the same mask I wear at work. I think of it as a jacket, I said, forcing the words out, not willing to let myself stop now that I'd gotten going. I don't process emotions the right way. I don't feel things the right way. I know that, she said suddenly. I met her gaze, her expression one of confusion, telling me that she already knew everything I was about to tell her. You know what? You never felt real love growing up, Celine told me. That damaged you and it's horrible. But I know who you are, and that jacket doesn't fool me. Blinking in surprise, I stared at her. What do you see under the jacket? It's the little moments, she said. Something that doesn't happen, something I don't see, rather than what I do. You care for me, but when I tell you something bad that happened to me, you get protective instead of empathetic. It takes you a second. You want to get back at the person who hurt me, but then you look at me and you realize that's not what I need. You see my sadness and you hear the way I'm talking, and you listen and react in the way that you know I need. That's not right, though, I murmured. It's not normal. Normal isn't what matters, Celine told me. It's who you are that matters. Everyone code switches, everyone acts differently around different people, and... She hesitated. Are you uncomfortable wearing the jacket? The question took me aback. No, not uncomfortable. It just gets tiring sometimes. You don't always have to keep it on, especially around me, she said with a smile. That's like me always having some elaborate makeup routine and never letting you see my bare skin. I've never needed you to be perfect, Travis. That's not what a relationship is about. A relationship is about caring and supporting each other, and being there and remembering the little things and wanting a future together, and I think you do those things. Do you want a future with me? I do, I murmured, I just don't know if I'm the right person for that future. You deserve someone who reflects the best of who you are because you're so special. You're loving and giving and compassionate, and that's not who I am." "I think it's my decision who I want to be with," Celine said, "and it's not about logic. It's not about who should be with me, it's about who I want, and I want you." She hesitated. "I love you, Travis." I took in a sharp breath, feeling goosebumps prickle along my skin, and I stared her in the eyes in shock. A beat passed. Then I replied, "I love you too." As she smiled widely back at me, I realized I meant it, and I believed her, that this was what love could be, two people who made a choice. On occasion from then on, I did ship my jacket, mostly when it got tiring or when it was confusing, like a colleague who had gotten back together with an ex-boyfriend who she hated. Celine was so good at explaining the feelings behind actions that baffled me, taking apart the complexity from a blend of emotions that were each confusing enough already. And there were nights that my emotional batteries were just spent, but she needed a vent anyway. I explained where my mind was at, what I was capable of absorbing and responding, and she understood. Eventually, it came time to meet her parents. I talked with her about it and explained that I was absolutely going to keep my veterinarian jacket on at all times. She agreed and said that there was no reason to assume I'd ever need to confess my social and emotional difficulties to her parents. She told me that it was the most private of personal information, and I shouldn't feel pressured to share it with anyone. We rang the doorbell. The neighbourhood, just the kind of place I'd expect an older couple to live, and to have raised a daughter like Celine. A cheerful area of the suburbs with rose bushes and daffodils and a bird feeder. Then the door opened, and my boss Carl stood there with a smile on his face. I saw the moment where it almost started to slip, barely perceptible, but expert that he was in emotional control, he immobilized each face muscle and kept that smile firmly in place. "Dad, this is Travis. Travis, this is my dad Carl." "It's wonderful to meet you, Travis," he said, holding out a hand. I shook it firmly, wordlessly, my mind feeling like it had frozen over, coldness having slid up my spine and into my brain, and into my limbs, making my actions feel jerky and robotic. But in that moment, as I had many moments before, I just slipped on the jacket. "You as well, sir," I replied, a friendly smile on my face. "Celine, your mum is busy in the kitchen, but she said dinner should be ready right on time," Carl said, moving aside to let us in. "There are some appetizers on the dining room table." Everything in me was screaming that this was wrong, that I needed to make some excuse, duck out of dinner, and just run, or at least lock myself in the bathroom to come up with a game plan. But the situation didn't call for that, considering how Celine had imagined it playing out, and the way she deserved. So I followed them both into the dining room, pouring myself some soda and taking a nacho from a bowl with a hefty scoop of salsa. "I'm going to say hi to Mum," Celine said. "You two be nice." When she left, Carl looked at me and met my gaze straight on. Never the easiest man to read, my boss, and this was no different. But this was his territory, his home, and I knew all I needed to do here was defer to him, at least for now. "You didn't know?" he murmured. "No." "All right, later. We'll have an aside under the guise of fatherly concern." I nodded once. "Go introduce yourself to my wife." Dinner was delicious, which was nice, because it was one thing I didn't have to lie about. But Celine had been insistent that her mother was an excellent cook, so I'd been confident that part of the night would go smoothly. I talked about my job as a vet, Carl discussed his work in computer repair, and Denise went over exactly how boring it was to do data entry, though she seemed to enjoy it from the way she described it. After dinner, with a wink in Celine's direction, Carl said he wanted to talk with me outside, and he escorted me to the backyard. We walked to the edge of the porch, A playground still there in the large yard, worn from use and then later disuse, but hopefully with the potential for grandchildren. I remained silent, letting him choose how to begin the conversation, and I completely shed my jacket. "Isn't this something?" he sighed. He paused for a long moment. "Do you love her?" It was an unexpected first question, but I nodded. "Yes." "You sure?" That was more expected. "There are a lot of ways in which I'm broken, sir, but I don't lie to your daughter. She knows who I really am. She loves me anyway, and I love her in every way I'm capable." He nodded slowly. "I'm the behind-the-scenes guy, the tech guy, the organizer," he said slowly. "I don't get my hands dirty, and I don't put myself at risk. You do." "What's your worry? Her safety?" Carl grimaced and shook his head. "This isn't a movie, and I know you wouldn't do anything to put yourself at risk, much less anyone else in your life. To be honest, you're one of my best. If there's anyone I could see making it to retirement at an old age, it'd be you." I examined his expression. But I'm still worried. If something goes wrong, and we both know things go wrong, if you get killed, if you get arrested, that leaves her holding the bag. And that bag... I'm assuming you two are going to want kids?" I nodded. "We do." I paused. "You did, and you did pretty well." He gave me a side-eye glance before looking back out into the backyard. "My job is different from yours. You know that." "You're less likely to get taken out, but one of us could roll on you if you misjudged us," I said. "No disrespect. I know you're good at your job and choosy about who you hire for jobs, but still, you could end up in prison too. You could have when she was younger." Carl paused. "True." A heavy silence settled around us, the sounds of suburbia contrasting strangely with the topic of conversation. "There are a lot of questions I would ask a stranger that I already know the answer to, since it's you. So that saves time, but it also opens up new ones." He turned to face me, and I turned to meet his gaze. "Are you sure you deserve her?" "No," I answered without delay. "But we had that talk too. She's under the impression that is her choice." Carl gave me a tired smile and shrugged. "Hard to argue with that." "It is." "There are some I would have shown the door," he said. "Some of our guys, you know the type, is more than deserving better. I feel like she wouldn't be safe with them. But I know she's safe with you, Travis, and honestly, that's the most I could ask for." "Thank you, sir," I muttered. I took a breath. "If you want me to quit, I will. It's already crossed my mind more than once." Carl's mouth twisted in thoughtful contemplation before he shook his head. "This isn't about your job, despite that rigmarole people give about total honesty in relationships. It's about who you are. What kind of a man you are, and what kind of a man I'd be satisfied with as my daughter's partner. Believe it or not, I'm satisfied. I don't think I would have been if you'd asked my permission when you first met her, but she's talked about you for months. You make her happy, and from what I can tell, she makes you happy. I don't know where this is going, but I'm not going to stand in your way." I nodded slowly. "I've got one question for you," I said. He cocked an eyebrow. "You think I make a good father?" He took a breath. "I think I made a pretty good one. I wasn't quite as damaged as you are, but I did end up in my current career for good reasons. So yeah. And if Celine knows you as well as you say she does, she'll help you be a great father." "I never thought I was capable of this," I confessed to him. "Any of this. It just sort of happened." "That's the thing about life, son," he murmured. It doesn't always take you where you want to go, but sometimes you end up where you need to be.